Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk to you about Vedic astrology and a few other topics, but mostly about Vedic astrology and what's coming for the new moon. So we had a new moon. I'm going to show you the chart in a few seconds. First of all, I just want to say I'm very excited about my upcoming collaboration um, with Lalita Donatella Trebek. And we'll give you the date of that premiere episode very soon. Also, I'm a little bit out of sorts today, so I apologize if I seem a little bit off kilter. I did get my second COVID shot. That does do a number on you. It's not as bad as some people that I've seen, but I am a little bit flu-like. So I'll use that as my excuse in advance for any detriments or problems you see with this recording. I was actually thinking back to and I recall this, I believe, in the last episode that I ran, and thinking back to astrological phenomena that occurred around 30 or 60 years ago when Saturn was in Capricorn. And these events, it's interesting that we had civil rights activity and a lot of attention on things like child abuse, satanic abuse, which turned out to be incredibly exaggerated. And I'm not saying that to offend anybody who was victimized. They're also in that particular manner, but the sheer numbers of it were incredibly high. The other thing that happened was, if you think back to the 60s and the 90s, and heading back to the slave period, it was interesting because about maybe around 3 to 4 years ago, or actually about 2 years ago, there was a reactivation of interest in astrology. The funny thing of that is I'm old enough to remember when there was a reactivation of interest in astrology in the 1960s, especially the late 1960s, but definitely in the 1960s, and also in the 1990s. So I learned Vedic astrology in 1987, excuse me, in 1990. My apologies. But there was a lot of interest in the harmonic convergence, which occurred in 1987. And there were also a lot of trying to think of the right term to put in it, a lot of doomsday scenarios forecast in the 1990s. For those of you not old enough to remember that, believe me, there were a great many people who said the world was, the Eastern Seaboard was going to be swallowed up by a wave. There were going to be UFO invasions. We were going to have, there was going to be a lot of apocalyptic frenzy before the end of the century. So whether that's centennialism or just Saturn doing its job, in the 1960s, we were all worried we were going to be wiped out by nuclear war. And while all these things are at least possible, there were earthquakes in San Francisco in the late 1980s, early 1990s, serious earthquakes. A lot of the more dire predictions tend to have a bad track record. So I'm just encouraging people to just stay solid, stay So if you live long enough, something bad's going to happen. That doesn't mean I don't believe that astrology can predict these things. In fact, I do. And I think we had a really serious event. Obviously, in 2020, we had a really serious event in 2001. But those were more lunar node activities than they were Saturn activities. So although the one last year was a Saturn lunar node activity together. And I think there's a tendency to believe in dire events, especially if, number one, the belief system to which you adhere isn't prevailing or seems to be being defeated. So there has to be some kind of a evil plot behind it, or else the um, the world seems to be heading into an abyss, and there's not much people can do about it. In the meanwhile, individuals don't look at the positive things that are happening in the world. So they don't look that we've managed over the past year and a half to get vaccines developed far more quickly than we have previously. And that actually bodes well for treatment of serious illnesses. I can remember how long it took to get AIDS medications approved in the United States, and everybody was upset about that, and rightly so. And so we have we have several COVID vaccines approved very rapidly, and that's frightening for people because they were approved too rapidly, and they didn't necessarily trust the person who was in charge at the helm. But that has nothing to do with the actual vaccines being developed. Okay, so the actual vaccines being developed are being developed by people who have worked with this technology for at least 10 years. It's not a brand new technology. So I'm just trying to encourage people not to get all that upset about the vaccines and how dangerous they are and how unpredictable they can be and all this other stuff. The vaccines are largely safe. They're uncomfortable, but they're largely safe from what I can tell. And I think you'll see an opening of the United States and the rest of the world sooner rather than later. It'll take about, most pessimistic estimates of economic recovery are about 2 years into the future. Some more catastrophic scenarios have us not recovering from this for many years. And that's induced recessions, unless there are factors that cause them to be prolonged. Like, let's say there is some kind of an environmental problem, such as happened in the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, or there's some kind of a problem with demand, as happened in 2000, or unless there's some kind of hesitancy to spend money on the part of the government, which happened in 2008, then that'll prolong a recovery. The current indicators are that people actually, in fact, do want to return to work. They do want to get back on the job, and they do want to succeed. There is one thing I would like to focus on very solidly right now, is that Jupiter's in Aquarius. And I'm just going to share the screen with you so you can see that. Now, this is, from my perspective, this is very good because Jupiter's in whenever a planet exits to debilitation in a Vedic chart, it puts a spring in its step. That's really the only, it's really kind of a corny way to phrase it, but it's true. It puts a spring in its step and it expands. It makes it more expansive. It makes it more optimistic. It makes it more fun to be around. So a lot of people who are geniuses had Jupiter in Aquarius. Einstein had Jupiter in Aquarius. And one of my teachers from India, Mr. Rao, had felt that Jupiter in Aquarius is one of the better places it can be, almost better than Jupiter in Cancer, because it's like it's got a breath of fresh air. It can innovate. It can move forward quickly. The Clinton administration benefited from a Jupiter in Aquarius transit. So I think one of the things that people should keep their eye on increasing demand. There is a danger of inflation, not because of government spending, not because the government's doing anything wrong, but because of too much money chasing after too few goods, which is actually the reason for inflation. So right now we're experiencing gas shortages. One reason is the Keystone Pipeline. Another reason was that tanker in the Suez Canal. Another reason was it was a hack on the largest provider of oil and energy products to the eastern seaboard of the United States. Now, if you look at the chart, that hack from any competent astrologer should have been predicted, because Venus and Rahu and Mercury are all in the same sign in Taurus, which has to do with natural resources to a very large extent. So but these planets won't stay in that sign. Mercury will change signs. Let's see now. Okay, so just go ahead a little bit so you can see Mercury's in Taurus. Now, there will be a retrograde period coming up. Okay, so we have Mercury retrograde around June 16th. Excuse me, and that will be over around June 10th. We'll see a Mercury retrograde period. Let me get the precise date for you. No, sorry. It's 2014. I didn't want to do that. Sorry about that, folks. It's really far in the future. June. Let's go back to June 1st. Okay, so Mercury will go retrograde sometime before the end of May. Let me see now. My apologies. I should have done this beforehand. All right, so Mercury's still direct around May 25th. He's heading away from Rahu. Venus is also heading away from Rahu. And next month, it will go into, you see now, around May 20. All right, so the 28th of Mercury and Venus will go into Gemini. Now that should restore some distribution of oil. But you'll start to see prices increase around June 1st, and that will affect the economy, obviously. But The one thing I like to point out is Jupiter is still aspecting Mars, Jupiter, and you'll see a lot of panic in the government, especially around this time, around May 28th through most of June, about excessive government spending and what are we going to do about this, and so don't be surprised if through the first 3 weeks of June, everybody seems to be panicking about energy prices and also about civil unrest and also about race relations and also about um, um, panic about right-wing groups taking over the country. I think one of the things, now again, I acknowledge that there are some right-wing extremists out there. However, given Jupiter's presence in Aquarius, it seems unlikely that they will be extremely active, to me anyway. And also, this Sun Rahu combination will tend to make the government overreact. This will be especially true around May 29th and around the eclipse, which will happen around May 26th. So I expect to see a little bit of a panic in the United States around that time about costs, about cyber attacks, about media, and those things will become very important to people. We do have, let's go back to today's date, now chart. So these are things I'm telling you to watch out for over the next few months. The summertime is going to be what I would call a hot summer. It's going to be a relatively violent summer. So just be aware of that. Is not really, so May 26th is the eclipse. And then we go back to today's date. We're talking about. So Mercury tends to act like the planet is in, with which it's in conjunction. So Mercury will act like Rahu, especially right now. It'll act very. So you probably noticed some communications problems over the past few days, over the past week or so, and that's mainly because of the Mercury conjunction with Rahu. They'll tend to get a lot better after Mercury changes signs around May 28th, and I think you'll actually start to see it get less panicky after May 26th. But I think one of the things that I've always taught myself to do is not to panic before it's time to panic. So we have a new moon right now. This is kind of a significant new moon. The sun's in Aries. The sun's in Aries. The moon is in Aries as well. So the new moon isn't quite here yet. When the new moon gets here, it'll be tomorrow. So it'll be around May 11th. And so we go a little bit earlier, and we go to half hour earlier. Sorry about that, folks. Around noontime. Let's pick noontime as a compromise date. Go with New Bedford again. This is in Los Angeles. So creep up a little bit. 12, 12:30. And 12:45 here. I know this is as exciting as watching paint dry, but all right. So we'll call the new moon around 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in Bedford, and the rising sign will be Leo. So this is actually a good new moon for a lot of reasons. Number one, it has a lot of impact on. It allows you to take up new activities that you wanted to take up for a long time before, and maybe even strike up new romantic ventures because of Rahu, Venus, and Mercury, because you're getting impatient with being alone. And also from the sign, though, the new moon is in the 9th house from the rising sign, so that's extremely good. The other thing is, as I told you last week, May 14th is supposed to be one of those flawless days. There are 3 flawless days during the year. And I wouldn't say it's totally flawless, but basically it's a good time to start new activity. So this next week, the moon it's a good time to get rid of stuff when the moon is waxing, to throw away anything you don't need, or cut alliances, or break off, or maybe even make new arrangements or new negotiations with new people, or new negotiations with old people, and just start to try new things. If we look at the map of the chart, career-wise, it's a good time to try new things, new career ideas. Mars is in the 11th house. Good time to get involved in sports. Good time to get involved in physical fitness. Ketu's in the 4th house. Good time to renovate the house. Saturn's in the 6th. Good time to get rid of diseases or people in your life you don't like. Jupiter's in the 7th. Open up new business relationships or start new business relationships over the next week. And the Rahu Venus Mars conjunction is pretty good. Venus is in its own sign. Rahu's in its exalted sign. Mercury's in a friendly sign. So this is actually a good time to try for new careers, or career goals you thought were out of your reach. Now, again, you may fail, but that's not bad. Rahu is also in a division called Vargotama. That is, it's in the same sign in the Navamsha chart as it is in the birth chart. So is Ketu. That makes Rahu and Ketu extraordinarily strong over the next month or so. So essentially what that means is it's a good time for meditation if you're drawn in that direction. It's a good time for new discoveries, or for getting new things, or for trying new things out. So let's say there's been some activity you've been interested in trying out, especially in artistic or entertainment areas. This is the right time to go after them. Venus and Mercury isn't really what I would call a sexy combination, but it does put a lot of glitter on a person. So a person will feel more like dressing up, more like going out, more like socializing with this combination. Also, because of the Aruda for the 7th house being here, it may also be a time when people get attracted together very quickly, but the expectations may be unrealistic. And what I mean by that is Rahu will promise the moon, the sun, and the stars, and Venus will make you fall in love with that promise. But Rahu is also fickle, so he can move on to other people and promise them the same thing as he's promising you. So it's best to be cautious in romance the next month. Venus is going to be very strong. You're going to attract anybody who's relatively good looking is going to attract a lot of suitors, even people who aren't exceptional looking, but are nice and communicative and speak well. They'll do extremely well in relationships. If you're quiet or shy, this isn't the month for you, but if you're outgoing or you're materialistic, it is. So let's look at the time and space chart. But new moon, great for getting rid of things over the next couple of days. Great for opening the door and saying, let's try something new, especially some innovations in technology because Rahu rules over those things too. Let's go to the time and space change map. Sorry, we spent so much time flicking through where Mercury was in the chart. And so these are the areas that are going to be hit most strongly by this combination of planets. So essentially, so the moon is weak, so you don't want to be on a moon line, but that's right in Connecticut, New York City, maybe extending to Washington, D.C., maybe extending into Massachusetts. Massachusetts has a, I have to look carefully. It's not a Jupiter line. Yes. Looks like it's a no, it isn't Jupiter line. It's a descending Jupiter line running through it. So there'll be a lot of optimism in the Northeast in Canada. It's a Saturn line, and there'll be a lot of shifts and a lot of attention in government, and especially in business. So Wall Street's going to have, I would say, an interesting week ahead. So I'm expecting some kind of a panic. Not really a major panic, but more like what they used to call a correction in the market over the next week or so. And also, Jupiter's passing, but again, the optimism will be very strong. So it won't be a major thing, but you'll see a new trend or a new transition in the market. And it'll aim more towards military involvement, especially in South America. And it'll aim more towards financial growth. There's still panic in Brazil to a certain extent, or there's still economic problems in Brazil. They can't seem to get their foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. But by the end of the year, they will. I have no worry about that. Mars is crossing through Iceland, so another possibility of some kind of volcano, or maybe just an overactive geyser or an accident in Iceland. And maybe around the Azores too. The other parts I want you to pay attention to are Saturn line running through Eastern Europe, Germany, Prussia, not Prussia, excuse me, Germany, Austria, Italy. And so this will cause some financial troubles, and also through Finland, through Sweden. Finland's over here, through Sweden, and also through Egypt. I'm sorry, not Egypt, through Algeria over here. So that those parts of the world will be adversely affected by economics. The other parts that are going to be there'll be a lot of political intrigue in Turkey, especially around Ankara. Eastern Europe will have a lot of, but there'll be a lot of optimism in Ankara too. Um, Also, so I'm not necessarily sure this means the economy is going to open up in Turkey and Eastern Europe, but it looks strong to me that it will. The sun and the moon are heading through Russia, past Moscow, and also through Central Africa. So that part of the world may see some improvement, but also probably some more authoritarian government action, but also the starts of new governments. And Venus and Mercury and Rahu are running through Eastern Africa, and looks like Iran. But there is a nice Venus line running through the middle of Iran, so I think that indicates they're probably going to try to get COVID under control. Mars only has India only has a Mars line running through it right now. So that means there's going to be violence or civil unrest in the country, especially in the eastern third of the country. Also, there's a possibility of border conflict with China because of this right here. We're looking at Vietnam, China, and so Vietnam and China in particular, we're looking at some financial strife and also some communications problems with the government. Jupiter is passing close to Japan, or the Jupiter lines are essentially reinforcing Japan from two different directions. And you should see Japan doing quite well over the next few years, over the next few months. South Korea too. And Venus is in Western Australia, so you'll probably see some problems with increased COVID outbreaks in Western Australia. And some, I want to say, tribal problems in mid-Western Australia. Yeah. Yeah, the other parts that I'm looking at where Australia aren't very populated. They're not really significant areas. And if you look at, there's a lot of activity in Hawaii and in the region just above Tierra del Fuego. So it looks to be another interesting week. I expect to see Brazil and the United States panicking a lot over the next few weeks, mainly because they're such Rahu-dominated countries. It's not necessarily a bad thing to be Rahu-dominated. Some of my colleagues may disagree with that, but essentially they're the ones who brought this marvelous technology. Rahu countries are the ones who brought this marvelous technology to us. They essentially, it's a very inventive planet, so it doesn't always do bad things. But I do think, also, I think you're going to see the media caught in more court cases around the world over the next couple of months. And that's mainly because of Mercury's movement into moving with Rahu and moving into Gemini, and then coming back and visiting Rahu for about 2 weeks. So it should be interesting. June should be a very interesting month. May is interesting, but June should be more interesting. And I also think you'll see in May to mid-June a sudden shifting of gears in terms of presidential politics and politics in the country overall. It'll be very, very difficult to hide evidence or to deceive people. Let's put it that way. And I'm not talking about anything like the election. That's not what I'm talking about. It'll be very, very tempting for people in power to deceive you or tell you some things X when it's in fact Y. But so just watch out for that over the next couple of months. The other thing is, from the charts, I'm seeing some major problem spots, but not what I would call major catastrophe. Let's just add some Uranus and Neptune and Pluto lines in just for the thrill of it all. Yeah. To get out of this page. So let me get out of here. So we'll pull some outer planets out, and we'll pull out some of the other important measures. Okay. All right, so we're looking at Pluto's in the same sign as Saturn again. Uranus is in the same sign as the Sun, the exalted Sun is. So expect some disruptions in political power. So we're seeing stuff like that happening right now. What's happening with Lynn Cheney in the United States, and you can also expect to see some scandals connected with women or minors over the next 2 weeks or so, and that's because of the Mercury Venus Rahu conjunction. The week starts off, so let's talk about what's happening for each sign. Those with an Aries sun and rising or moon actually look to have a pretty good month. There will be slowness at work. A lot of additional responsibility at work. They will have dissatisfaction with their financial situation, which should pale by June, and they'll be a little bit more aggressive than normal. In terms of love, it'll be a little bit restrictive for them, although Venus is in its own sign and it's actually in pretty good shape. And K2, they'll still have to look out for people who are being sneaky and attacking them behind the scenes. Jupiter's in the 11th house, so that does promise that they'll start to get more fame and recognition, and that's good. For Taurus, Sun, this is May 15th to June 15th in the Vedic calendar. We have Rahu, Venus, Mercury combination, so this sign should be blessed in terms of attention from other people. but it'll also attract seemingly inappropriate or unusual or special partners. So that's a little bit disappointing, but they'll at least get a lot of attention. In terms of home life looks fine, although it will be expensive. And in terms of career life, they'll probably do well all in all if they work hard, and they'll probably have a chance to change jobs or supervise people. For Gemini, Mars sits in the first house. They have to be careful about who they get into a relationship with. The person could use them or could be an inappropriate match. And for this sign, Saturn's in the 8th house. That's not a good position for Saturn. But Jupiter's in the 9th, so this actually does give help from overseas or help from people you wouldn't expecting the help from. Jupiter aspects Mars in the chart, so this sign will be a little bit more aggressive or noisy than it usually is. Most Tauruses are, if not quiet, they're self-controlled. And in terms of career life, they tend to look like they'll have a pretty good career life this next month, but their real focus is on their friends and how they and how to make progress career-wise, because all your attention will be focused on relationship life. This is for Sun, rising sign, or Moon in Gemini. For Cancer, Sri Lagna is in the first house, which is really a good thing. So this sign will be somewhat blessed this month. They'll have a lot of expenses, but they'll also have a lot of financial growth. And overall from the sign, there may be some problems or distractions at home, maybe some problems or distractions with children, but relationship opportunities start to open up to them in a very wide sense. And Moon and Sun in the 9th house looks pretty good for this sign. Excuse me, in the 10th house looks pretty good for this sign. And I think the major thing I look out for people with this rising sign is not being tricked by people, especially after June 1st. The Sun in Leo. Leo is in good shape this month. This is a chart. This is Leo's chart. Some disappointments at home, but relationship life will expand enormously, and enemies will be defeated pretty easily. Sun is very strong in the chart. Venus, Mercury, Rahu in the house of career promise growth in career and growth in financial status. So this looks like a very good month for Vedic Leos. For Vedic Virgos, Mars is in the 10th house, so we'll give a lot of focus, a lot of attention on career life, and you'll be wanting to really put a lot of energy into career life. A lot of travel. Jupiter's in the 6th house, so some animosity with more traditionally oriented people. Ketu is in the 4th house, aspecting that Venus, Rahu, Mercury cluster. So this should give a lot of luck, a lot of what we would call undeserved luck, or just luck that pops out of nowhere. And the Sun and Moon are in the 8th house, so that'll give a lot of energy and vitality to the sign. For Libra, this is October 15th to November 15th. Basically a lot of home responsibilities still show up in the chart. They'll be there for another year or so. But Jupiter's in extremely well placed in the 5th house. And the Sun and Moon are there also. So that Sun and Moon combination tends to be rather good. for this chart. So if we're looking at Libra, it's going to put a lot of focus and a lot of force on relationship life. A lot more willingness to be daring. Inheritances or legacies show up because of planets in the 8th house. And also career life and career stability look really, really good for this chart this month. Romantic life is not outside the question. And I think you'll see a lot of growth in the sign over the next year or so. A tremendous amount of growth in the sign. Now for Scorpio, Scorpio's got relationship probabilities, very strong relationship probabilities. It's not afraid of anything right now. Jupiter's in the 4th house, protecting the entire chart. And Moon and Sun are in the 6th house, but they've never really been your favorite for all these years. And you have Venus, Rahu, and Mercury in the 7th house, so you'll have a lot of relationship opportunities. Mars will be in the 8th house, and you'll see a lot of shift towards materialistic gain in the chart. For Sag rising, Sagittarius has its Lord Jupiter in the 3rd house, so it'll give expanded growth, expanded desire for learning. Mars is in the 7th house. It doesn't give good luck in terms of staying out of arguments with the spouse. And there's a feeling I'm getting that the Sun will have to be a little bit of a chameleon in order to please their spouse, just because of a variety of things. But basically, from this chart, 3rd house, the 1st house Lord, the 3rd house is generally good. Planets in the 5th house are yes, let me go back to Sagittarius again. I'm sorry. So I think you'll see for this sign a lot of increased love affairs, although not a lot of happiness in long-term relationships. A lot of fighting in long-term relationships. For Capricorn, Saturn sits in the 1st house, and Sun sits in an angle to Saturn. They're not interfering with each other. They're actually look fairly good together. But from the chart, the Moon and Sun are in the 4th house, so it could indicate a change of residence or a change of direction in life. And for Rahu, Venus, and Mars to be in the 5th house, it could indicate the birth of a child. Let's see now. Okay, and let's go on to the last. Oh, I'm sorry. The last sign, Pisces. Last 2 signs, Aquarius has Jupiter in the 1st house. Very, very strong, very, very powerful placement there. And its rising sign, Lord Saturn, is in the 12th house. So there is a tendency of the signs to stay hidden behind the shadows or not interact that much with people. However, this month will be a little bit of an exception because Sun and Moon are in the 3rd house. Rahu, Venus, Mercury are in the 4th house, and Mars is in the 5th house. So there's more of an inclination to take a chance on new projects or new activities. And I think this sign has had a bit of a revelation lately in that it can't keep on giving out to other people without getting something in return. So I think this particular combination, this chart, looks good for career. It looks stable. It looks solid for career. For the last sign, Pisces. Pisces is basically benefiting from the Sun-Moon conjunction in the 2nd house, benefiting from the Venus-Mercury Rahu combination in the 3rd house, not benefiting from Mars aspecting um, so okay, so that's it for the okay, so that's it for this week. Pisces should have a good month. I'm sorry I'm blacking out for a few minutes here. But it's but again, arguments at home show up, misunderstandings with supervisor, but Jupiter's in the 12th house, so there'll be Pisces will be a little bit more dreamy than usual, uh, as they say in Western astrology. So I think that's about it for this month. Again, I remind you to stay tuned for the show with Lolita down at Rebecca. I am still planning on starting a school. It got thrown a little bit out of whack by a personal matter that happened in March, but it'll come back again. And also working on writing a book and also working on teaching students and doing readings. If anybody wants to contact me for a reading, they should call me at 508-525-0001. I do every reading virtually now because our store is closed for renovations until summertime. And I'll be happy to talk with you if you want to talk with me. Thank you very much and have a great week. And namaste. We're going to expand and make this, we're going to blow up the screen, get a little more prominent. Yeah, can't do that. Okay. I'm going to stop the share. There we go. So everyone, have a great week. Believe in yourselves. You can do it. And I wish you every success in the world. Don't listen to the naysayers. Don't listen to the people who are predicting doom and gloom. They're almost always wrong. Bye-bye now.